we have at least one listener. I've written it down where they're from. In Susanoo, which is between Tokyo and Nagoya.
Oh, so, this is like a countryside Japanese.
A little bit. And the other one is in... I wrote it down poorly, but just outside of the Tokyo megapolis.
Do you think they're friends?
Toward the countryside.
Do you think that's how they... Do you think that's how we got two? You think they're friends and like one told the other about us?
They're pretty far away from each other.
They have social media just like we do.
That's true. It could be, or it could be like some Americans over there. It could be...
it could be like, if you think about it, right? Okay.
Oh, no.
I'm trying to not go anime, like, deep, because that's immediately what my brain thought. So, like, commonly in anime, people are in school far away from where they come from. So maybe they're friends from school and they're on a break or something like that. And the other one's, like, back home with their family right now. And, I don't know. Just going for...
Just a little bit of an aside before we keep on going with this episode, which is episode 2.
The pageant.
The pageant. Is it beauty pageant or the pageant?
I think it's just the pageant.
Okay. Do you like slice of life animes?
Yes.
Like sweet little slice. Silver Spoon.
I feel like I've seen that one.
It's about some kids at a agricultural...
Yes! Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorites. Like, I forgot all about that one. It's been years since I've seen it. I loved it so much.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, it's such a good one.
And Polar Bear Cafe, if you've never watched it.
Yes, that one too. I love that one too. Pinky-kun. Oh, sorry.
Every once in a while, to make myself feel better, I'll listen to La Mambo.
We could totally do it. We could do an entire podcast on slice of life anime. By the way, we could.
It's
literally
true.
Do it.
I'm Julia Sugarbakers. I'm Julia Sugarbakers. I'm Julia Sugarbakers. I'm Julia Sugarbakers. And that's Marjorie. Just so you will know, and your children will someday know, is the night the lights went out in Georgia. The lights went out, the lights went out, the lights went out, the lights went out. And that is the night the lights went out in Georgia.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Well, now you do.
So,
Hello, listeners.
Hello, listeners.
We're glad that you're back, all 4 of you.
No, what are you talking about? We have 20 for this.
What?
Yeah, this
tell me the total listeners.
Well, I think it's 20-ish. It's somewhere around. You see, I did a thing and I put an ad on Facebook for this. I spent $10 just to see what, and we got 1,200 looks at the ad, and I was like, oh, 1,200, that's great. Which turned into 20 listeners.
That's actually not that bad. I mean, technically,
that's not.
I actually do coaching on Facebook ads. That's actually not bad.
So welcome to our 20 listeners.
Welcome,
I don't know how many of you actually subscribed, but hopefully you did.
Yeah.
And if you didn't, well, then you weren't listening to me right now.
Or, they might be back, right? You never know.
That's exactly right. That's
awesome.
Please like and subscribe or whatever you do to podcasts.
Us. Please like and subscribe us. That way we'll know. I mean, we're going to keep doing these regardless. So, but that would be good to know that we're not doing it into a void.
That's exactly right. So, in starting this episode, I feel like the title should be "The Search for Meshach Taylor," because he's still not here.
Well, we can't. We could definitely point out that Meshach is still not on here, but I mean, it's a slow burn. It's building up. We're still establishing the female dynamics. So
that's absolutely true.
We don't need to be throwing in no Meshach Taylor into the mix because
we don't need a gay man.
Something like that.
So we open on Charlene and her chair again.
Ugh, that chair. That's a weird phone call, by the way. Like, and you know, go ahead. You start. I have a note about that.
So she's on this call, and she's like, "Hey, okay, oh, yeah, bye." Hangs up, and then like Maryjo asks her, well, "Who was that?" She's like, "I don't remember."
And this is my problem. Number one for this episode. Right? She's like, "I don't know." So we then find out literally like 3 minutes later that she actually did know. It's that she didn't want to say.
Right.
And so for me, this was already like a little red flag. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
You have this side gig, which, by the way, America, her side gig is with Kemper Cosmetics.
Thank you. I was like, I don't want to flip pages.
Kemper Cosmetics, who
cosmetic company.
They set it up. This sounds almost like a Mary Kay, and Julia really kind of shades it a little bit, and and basically kind of like makes it sound like it's weird, and I can't understand how you go into people's homes and give them makeovers, which
I'm exactly like Julia there. Why are you going into other people's homes, this stuff?
I have friends that do Mary Kay, and they love it, and they legitimately love it, and
that's true.
You know, and so I know that back then in the 80s, you know, if that actually wasn't an uncommon thing, not necessarily Mary Kay, but there were lots of those, right? I don't know if you remember this one from the 80s. Do you remember Princess House?
Yeah.
Like, I had cousins that did Princess House and had parties, and like my mom, like, she never sold it, but like they, you know, she helped like do the food for a couple of my family's Princess House parties. Like,
I mean, there was also Avon.
Yeah, it was like it was a thing. It was very prevalent.
My aunt did something called Beauty Control.
Oh, I remember Beauty Control. Yes.
Isn't that a great name?
I remember those catalogs because people used to give them to my mom, and she'd bring them home. And
Beauty Control.
Beauty Control. Yeah, no, it's. But what's funny is like, because Charlene said something in there. I don't know if you remember the joke about the lady she met at Carl's Jr.'s.
Yeah.
But the thing is she said that she said, "I met this lady at Carl's Jr. with a poor problem, and tonight I'm gonna go there and close him off." And I thought that is so great to me personally, because I was just like, why not, right? Like let's actually talk about it. Like, hey, some people actually don't know about makeup. Even to this day, there are people that are terrible with their makeup, and those kind of Mary Kay consultants and things like that, they actually help them.
Well, and then as we're talking about makeup, who storms in but Suzanne?
Oh,
and
she's upset. She's so upset.
She's so upset.
And watching this episode in hindsight, now at the age that we are, boy.
I think she was actually so she's upset because she's turning
30.
30. She says 29. She's actually turning 30. But I think she actually turned 30 in this episode. Like that's
Yeah, I know. I think that's actually like, and actually it was really happening in real life.
Yeah, and was it just me, or did they really, like, the styling age her up? Because I thought her face was perfect, but...
Well, Eric...
Even for the 80s, her style was older.
Yeah, but that's how everybody was styled. If you go back and look at... I don't know what it was about the 80s now. Because I actually, when she said that, I started remembering... some of the sewing patterns that I came across from the 80s. Yeah. And you saw this too when Maryjo and her daughter are in the bathroom.
Yeah.
There was something about some of the 80s styles and fashions that were like very Little House on the Prairie, and like they just made women look much older than they actually were.
I would also like to mention that this episode has my favorite of Julia's hairstyles. That part that it's like less on one side and more on the other, and it's a huge swoop.
Yeah.
I think it looks so good on Dixie Carter. It is my favorite of Julia's hairstyles.
Yeah.
Props to the hair and makeup for this episode.
I do believe hair and makeup was the only Emmy that they were nominated for, or won, or something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
they didn't have the same Emmy love that the Golden Girls did because, Hollywood was not really into, that. So,
Yeah.
But I do remember that they did actually get some Emmy nominations for hair and makeup.
Well, and then, Suzanne has her moment, and we find out that Charlene got news, and she tries to make Maryjo guess.
I hate when people do. By the way, when that happened, I completely related to Maryjo. Not that I don't always
Imagine.
Shut up. But yeah, when people do that in life, when they just give you no context, no anything, no clue, no nothing, and they say guess. Just like Maryjo, I was like, that makes me crazy. Why do you do that? America that's listening, or the rest of the world, why do you ask people to guess things if they have no context for what they're guessing about?
Well, if you guessed that Kemper Cosmetics has found their next Miss Preteen Georgia, you would have guessed correctly. And if you'd also have guessed somehow it was Maryjo's daughter, Claudia, you would have also guessed correctly.
So obviously, a little bit of our segue today, we're going to be talking about pageants a little bit as well, just because, So, I think for me, the best line of the entire episode is when Maryjo refers to it as it's like a breastathon at the Olympics, and and I thought, breastathon, my goodness, this is now the second episode where Maryjo has talked about breast.
Yes
2 out of 2.
Yes because we found out that Maryjo really doesn't like beauty contests. She feels like they're exploitation.
Nor does Julia. Who says,
but Suzanne, who was a former Miss Georgia World, which is, I believe, actually a drag queen title.
Yeah, because it was, well, I mean, obviously they have to be careful in how they do the phrasing, right?
Yes.
So clearly it would have been, if we were really calling it out, it would have been Miss Georgia Universe, because they're in the universe, the universe pageant thing there. Or Miss Georgia USA it would have been, technically, because that would have been the one that gets you into the Miss Universe. Yes, audience, I was a pageant person for a long time.
Yes, he was. And she said she always walked down the runway in her swimsuit with her head held high, which came to one of my favorite Julia lines from this episode. You had to. The stays in that bra were so big that if you looked down, you would have gouged yourself.
Yes. Well, it's funny because, so for people that aren't as familiar with, kind of those big, national level pageants, they were joking about how, it's not just about that, right?
Right.
There's also scholarships, there's also this. And the reality is that, sure, Miss America was a scholarship pageant, but Miss Universe, Miss USA, they were really beauty pageants. It was really about that. And I thought it was funny because even talking about tuition, my favorite line of this episode was Julia talking about tuition and said that it was degrading that women had to even do this for tuition, in which she said, why aren't Bob, Frank, and Ted flexing their tushies for tuition? And I thought, Lord.
Because men like Julia and Maryjo, men would never do this.
No.
To which Charlene and Suzanne say, are you calling men smarter? And Maryjo was like, in this? Yes.
They did. I was like, whoa. That caught me off guard.
And Suzanne replies, well, it's not like it's Playboy. And
Oof. I actually have some notes about this. We're going to do a little segue about this that I thought the audience would love to know a little backstory.
Go ahead.
In terms of, they start talking about, obviously the segues a little bit into pornography, right? Hefner, Playboy, the whole thing. And it was really funny because as I was listening to it, I thought to myself, we have such a different perspective, right? Because we're two drag queens and we're two gay men. And so as Julia was talking about that, I thought, what was the other side of the coin in terms of our culture, right? Our gay culture. And so I actually looked it up, right? And so this is really fun. So the very first gay, if you want to say gay pornography, so to speak, Do you know it started in the 1940s?
Wow.
Right. So here's what's great, right? This show is in the mid-80s. So I was like, wow, when did our exploitation of the male form start? Other than ancient culture, obviously. So
Right.
there's this guy, I know you'll like this. There's a guy named Bob Miser. So Bob Miser in the 1940s, he used to take photos of men, athletic men, muscular men, in very tiny posing Speedos that his mother made. and the pictures were then sold by mail, and he called the company the Athletic Model Guild. And so basically, if you subscribe to the Athletic Model Guild, you would get these postcards in the mail of the male form. Some of the famous people that posed for the Athletic Model Guild included none other than Jack LaLanne.
Oh.
Who posed not only in the Speedo, but without the Speedo as well.
Oh.
And so the Athletic Model Guild then led to the first actual publication called the Physique Pictorial, which this is to me was the absolute best thing ever, which is, and this is funny because, you know, Julia talking about this at the time that she was talking about it. My father, as you remember, he was really big into bodybuilding in the 80s.
Yep.
And there were men on the covers of Muscle and Fitness, Flex Magazine, all of these magazines in the 80s that were in the same level of undress as the men back in the 1940s. And why is that so funny? It's because in 1947, the dude was arrested and sent to prison for 9 months for basically porn charges. And these were not for naked men. These were literally men in the same things that men were doing bodybuilding competitions for in the 1970s and 80s and on the covers of magazines. So the idea of what was considered obscene for men evolved so much that you could have been arrested for the same things, right? And so then I was like, well, man, what about actually during the Designing Women era, right?
Right.
So the Designing Women era was also where the benefits happened. So there was a lawsuit, another little factoid, right? There was a lawsuit from a magazine company called Manual Enterprises. They went all the way to the Supreme Court in 1962. And that is what opened the door for what we knew as beefcake pornography.
Okay.
So the Supreme Court basically said, if presented in a certain way, i.e., like non-penetration, things like that, that it actually wasn't illegal to send it through the mail. So that's where mail-in pornography got its start and got its legalization, was in this 1962 Supreme Court case. And so that's where magazines like Play Guy and Inches and Playgirl, all of them got prominent after this in the 70s. And for the audience that did not realize it, this was actually referenced in a Cyndi Lauper song.
Okay.
So if you remember the song She Bop, which is about female masturbation, she actually talks about looking at the men in the pages of a Blue Boy magazine.
Okay.
So I thought it was just funny because as Julia was talking about how you'll never see men in this kind of way, I was like, oh, wait. For our people in the mid-'80s, this had been the status quo now for 20 years.
When you were talking about the dude in the 40s with the Speedos,
Yeah.
I was just picturing, what is the Marilyn Monroe movie with the...
Which one?
It's got the scene with the swimming.
Oh, you're talking about Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's when Jane Russell does the song.
Yes, it's Jane Russell does song.
I like
yes.
big muscles and red corpuscles. I love a beautiful, handsome man. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called Anyone Here for Love. So segue, audience. Sorry for this. Anyone Here for Love was part of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and the scene revolved around Jane Russell being surrounded by the men's gymnastic and Olympics team that was on the boat going over to Europe for the Olympics. And there's a giant number, which I know by heart, and we're not going to sing it here on the air, but it's literally...
because copyright.
Because copyright. And basically, like, it's... For me, I actually thought it was essentially the very first himbo anthem, right? Because women love to talk about himbos at this point.
Yeah.
Like, Jane Russell basically did the original anthem to himbos.
Yep.
And the men in the video were essentially behaving like himbos. And they were just, it was just perfect. So yeah. So segue, that was us talking about how, on the flip side of the coin to Julia's rant about men not putting their wares out there, she obviously has never picked up an issue of Blue Boy magazine like Cyndi Lauper had at the time.
Well, and then Maryjo goes, well, it's fine. I'll just never tell Claudia.
Oy, this another moment where Charlene is being weirdly secretive.
Yeah, and Charlene was like, well, she's the one who gave me the pictures. Charlie would no longer be my friend.
I would have actually been so angry that would have been not a good time. Like, no. And they kind of treated it like, Charlene's being silly again, but I was like, but that's a major
I feel like
there.
Julia pulled her aside and said, hey, if you ever do that again, you're fired.
Like, as a boss, I felt like that too. I was like, this feels like if it was a real world scenario and not a situational comedy, that actually would have been a kind of a big deal.
Right.
But it's Charlene, so how can anybody be mad at Charlene?
So now we to Maryjo's house, where we meet Claudia and Quentin, her children.
Aww. Quentin is so cute.
Her and Claudia are having a conversation about why can't she go do this pageant, and then Quentin comes in and has his little piece. I did a little research on Quentin.
Okay.
He's played by someone named Brian Lando, who is a producer of reality competition things like Guys Grocery Games and A Very Brady Renovation.
Oh my gosh, that's great!
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that makes me happy, because he was such a cute little kid there that, like, I didn't even think about him. I was more focused on Claudia, but that's actually great, because 80s kid actors did not have happy endings like that.
No, they did not. Claudia did a few, like, bit pieces throughout the years, so I didn't really, nothing to... Anyway.
I can't believe she's not been in a Hallmark movie at this point, like...
Well, there's no picture of her on IMDb, so I'm wondering if the fates were not...
Oh.
So, Maryjo eventually gets worn down and lets Claudia do it. And then there's a little bit of hypocrisy there.
Oh, I wrote that down too.
you go ahead, then. You go ahead.
So... So that's when we're sitting there and Maryjo is talking about how even if she does the pageant, she has to remember this is not their values and that their lives are not to be led by superficial pursuits. Meanwhile, if you've watched the episode, as we want you to watch it on Hulu, please subscribe to Hulu to watch this. Not sponsored. But as that's happening, Maryjo is putting on her night cream. She's getting her face ready for bed. She's doing all the things that, you know, women do to try to stay beautiful. Because at this point in time, we have not reached that point in female liberation where a woman can actually just be beautiful for the sake of her own self-worth. So it's implied that Maryjo is doing it not for her own self-worth, but for superficial outside influences.
Right. And so I thought, like, in watching this, that this would be the perfect point for a commercial break, because we're but it's not. We then suddenly we're at the pageant.
So this is something that I was I was confused about, right? Because I don't know about the rest of our audience or our listeners, but as an avid watcher of Toddlers and Tiaras, shut up. I had never really seen like a 2-day kind of thing, like part of it, but not for like this age level at least of pageants. Right. So it was really weird that they announced like the finalists the night before the actual pageant, because I was like, surely the pageant itself won't take that long. Did they really have to split it up over 2 days?
And I mean, so we should say that Claudia's 12-ish?
She's like 12-ish. She's like, because they called it preteen, so she had to be 11 or 12-ish.
Right. And the person who announces the is the current Miss Georgia World,
Marjorie Lee Winnick. Ooh.
Yes, Marjorie Lee Winnick.
Lord, I mean, you know what though? I watched this episode twice. So I watched it early in the week, and I watched it again earlier today.
Oh, same.
Aw, you know what was funny to me, and I thought about this long and hard, but I really realized that Marjorie represented the shift in the Republican Party and what they valued in terms of women and beauty standards. And
she's blonde, she's tall.
She's blonde, she's tall, she's thin. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's like a Fox News anchor. Like, as soon as it was happening, I was like, oh, because Suzanne definitely represented the Southern beauty standard between, like, Gone with the Wind and the 1980s.
Yep. Hi, Divine Miss Mims here. If you're enjoying this nonsense, you can follow us at MrMahaffey on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and drop us a line in our DMs. Also, to our Patreon supporters, thank you. We couldn't do this without you. So one thing that I noticed was that Maryjo, as each one of these children are being called, is critiquing the heck out of them.
They start becoming bullies.
It's true.
Her and Charlene, the two nicest members of the entire show, they show how competition can make even the sweetest parent turn into a monster.
Do you really think Charlene's one of the nicest ones?
I think if you had to rank the four of them, Maryjo and Charlene, just by their nature, are the nicer of the two of them.
That's you're right.
However, watching this, it shows the ugly side of competition and parenting, which, you know, this was not even that ugly. This was just kind of ugly.
I'm going to say this now because Claudia makes it, and now we go to commercial. And while we're at commercial, I would just like to say that this episode, I've seen this episode multiple times, but never through a little bit of an analytical eye. I do not enjoy the Maryjo and the Charlene's parts as much as I do when Suzanne and Julie are there. And that's not true for future episodes.
No. Well, that said, though, like they're given very specific roles in this episode, right?
True.
Like, for example, I don't know if you picked up on it, but there was a little bit of a racial tinge in Maryjo's critiques. So as Maryjo is going through the different girls, she talks about the hips on one of the girls. And at first you're kind of thinking to yourself, like, you know, whatever. She's talking about all of these young girls who are, by the way, preteen women. And so as she's doing that, she talks about the hips on one. And then when you realize, when they do the pan up as the fourth runner-up comes up on stage, she's talking about the only black female contestant out of the four of them. And I realized as I was watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is still part of that sexualization of female black bodies. And even when we're doing it in a light-hearted way, it still made its way into this episode.
So uncomfortable, too.
Yeah. I was like, why would you be even talking about her in this way? Because these are not even teen girls. These are preteen girls.
Right.
So I thought I thought, man, because the thing is, right? Like, obviously, we know America. We're not talking about actual Maryjo. We're talking about the writers of the show. And the fact is that the child that was cast to reflect the lineup of the people was the only black female on the show in that moment. So it was like, oi, this is where the show is going to get kind of crazy, because we're going to probably say a few things that listening that are fans of the show might not like, and you might think we're reading into it, but these are things that have to be talked about, because this is a major moment in the show where you actually see them kind of turning into little bit monsters. And the fact is that they're sexualizing a preteen black female in this lineup when they don't do the same thing for the rest of the girls.
Right. So now we're back at Sugar Bakers. And Claudia and Suzanne are Charlene and Suzanne are coaching Claudia.
Yes. Oh man. Pretend there's a board up your spine.
Yeah.
Woo!
God.
Can you imagine? Like, I actually thought about this because I remember watching the girls practice for the pageants in our high school. I remember, the different pageants that we used to go to. Well, I hosted the ones in our senior year because apparently that was a skill that I didn't know I had. And I remember the practicing for it, and I remember that was like still a thing, right? 1997, the South. That was still a thing. Balancing a book on your head and all of that stuff was still a thing.
What are you talking about? It's still a thing.
I know.
Like 2021.
It's still a thing.
It's still a thing.
Isn't
like
it
these
interesting,
small
though?
southern towns.
I think it's interesting in a way.
Queens. Huh?
It's interesting though when you think about it, right? Like the things that survive the eras, right? Like, how is that still? Obviously, we know that there are people that win these pageants and win these titles now that are not conventionally like what you would imagine. Like, there have been some trans females that have won their high school pageants, and males as well. But it's still a thing that's there. It's still a thing that people are competing for to this day, and you're kind of still scratching your head of like, is that really the best thing for everybody's self-esteem? Like,
and the one thing I got from this little scene, this little vignette, is Claudia seems to like Julia the most out of all of them. Like, seems to get what Julia's selling more than her mom, more than Suzanne. Like,
well, if you remember,
more than Charlene.
Julia is the only one that she calls aunt.
That's true.
She doesn't refer to Suzanne, and she doesn't refer to Charlene as aunt. She only refers to Julia as aunt.
That's true.
The one thing I got out of this is, when you're short, heels are necessary. That's the one point that I got out of this entire segue. And
I'm not short, I'm average.
I'm average. That's the thing, honey. We want you to be better than average. And I thought to myself, you know what? The first time I put on a pair of 4-inch heels, I also felt, this is great. So I side with Suzanne Sugarbaker in this.
About 3 hours later, your calves are not saying it's so great.
Oh, honey, after 20 minutes, the balls of my feet are already saying, nay, nay, Fluffy, we are not doing this today. No, you should have put some pads in here, girl, because this is going to be a rough night. I have had nights where my husband has actually had to hold me up because I found some cute shoes and I did not think it through. And by the end of the night, my feet were numb and I was like, how am I going to even make it back to the car? So
you take those shits off and you just walk.
No, it's true. It's true. No, I did walk, but I remember very specifically when I actually had to do this. And if you know about me, you know that my performance area is in Miami. So walking down the sidewalk in Miami in the middle of the night in bare feet in full drag, I was a little bit afeared.
That's why anytime I did drag, I always brought flip-flops with me.
I do that now.
Like, directly afterwards, kick those. You can't kick those shoes. I always wore like the knee-high boots.
I know you did.
Unzip and like have somebody yank them off your feet. And
usually
then
me.
You throw those flip-flops on and then go to IHOP.
Well, so I don't have flip flops anymore. I never did that, but I do have like more appropriate shoes, we'll say, because
Yes.
I can't not have the look still. I just need to have more comfortable shoes for the afterward.
Well, now in the show, we're suddenly back at the pageant.
Back at the pageant somehow.
Like, bam,
instantly,
bam.
it's the night of the pageant.
Yes. Marjorie meets Suzanne. Marjorie throws a little shade at her. Immediately.
Are you the mother?
And then we also, at the same time, like, there's a weird cut. You have Suzanne and Julia and Marjorie.
Yeah, the weird back and forth at this point.
Yes.
It was very strange.
They were in a makeup room. And then you have Charlene and Maryjo out front at like a food table. Interacting
hot
with
dogs.
Was it? Oh, it was hot dogs.
Hot dogs. At a
interacting
pageant.
with Debbie Hammonds.
Let me tell you something.
And her daughter, who kind of looks like Jessica
Let
Lange.
me tell you something.
What?
I forgot how much I love this scene so much.
That little girl doing that
That little
face.
girl doing that thing. Oh my gosh. I forgot about the moment. And as it started happening, I literally was like, oh, I forgot how much. And the thing is like, now, think about it, and you think about the fact that Jessica Lange has turned into the icon that she is now. And even at that point, she wasn't at icon status. She was just considered kind of like one of the pretty actresses of the 80s.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. The impression that it left on me of like, how adorable is it that like we're even talking about her? Like, she's just this like, you know, this kind of nothing Vanna White-ish. Like, she was on the level of Vanna White. Like, that's how they thought of Jessica Lange. And now she is literally like one of television's like legends at this point.
So now we go back to the makeup room.
Oh my gosh.
And Suzanne's having a crisis because she's just an aging beauty queen. She doesn't like
Let me
with
tell
no
you,
talent.
here's the
Like,
thing, right?
and she's not Julia.
I wrote this in all capitals, right?
Uh-huh.
Because, my goodness, when she said tearfully about all her speech about how she's just an aging beauty queen, how she has no talent, all she did was twirl a baton. I literally wrote, could you imagine how much money this woman would make now as a national pageant coach? Could you imagine?
I know.
I literally was like, oh my gosh. Like, this isn't even... Like, the little moment that she had with Claudia, I literally was like, oh my goodness. This woman could be a literal, self-made, like, rich woman.
Yes.
Off of pageant coaching at this point.
Yes. Not needing her 20 or 30 husbands, how many she's had.
And at this point, also, if this took place in the current days, she would easily have her own empire, number one, be married, number two, and not have to divorce them, and number three, she would easily, because of her fame, be one of the Real Housewives of Atlanta.
It's true.
All of that would happen. All of it. And she'd have her own separate reality show based on her pageant coaching industry.
Mm-hmm. Like Big Ange.
Like Big Ange. Or like the lady that does Dance Moms. Like,
yeah.
She could easily have had a show on Lifetime where it was talking about her pageant coaching.
So Suzanne rushes out. Marjorie comes in.
With that friend
and
of hers.
sends some mean things about her to this other random woman who's in a dress. Julia's still in there.
This whole episode also could have easily been called Catty Bitches. This could have been, because everyone is catty and everybody is mean in this episode.
So, but before we get to the important part of this episode, we flash back to Debbie, and we learn that her other daughter looks like Vanna White.
Yeah.
Debbie turns away, and Maryjo says, "It's kind of amazing that she has those two children that look like that, and she looks like Lauren Green."
I'm telling you,
I had to look him up because I did not remember.
You
and
forgot
then
Lauren Green?
And then I was like, oh, Bonanza!
Yeah. Yeah. Like, when she said the line, I was like, oh my God, that is a really mean line.
So at first, I thought Debbie was being played by really young Ellen because she kind of looks like her, but it's not. It's not. It's not.
No, it's not.
So, and then Maryjo and Charlene both have a little bit of self-actualization and realize that they're being mean. And that's all that's said about it for the rest of the
That was literally it. I can't. This episode's so weird. I feel so many conflicting feelings on this episode. It's just like, as an adult, it's just really a weird thing to watch.
So now we go back to the makeup room.
Ooh, America, and this is it. This is the moment.
Julia confronts Marjorie, and gives the most famous speech
of the entire
Designing
show.
Women history.
The whole show. This is the second episode, America,
right.
And this is the moment that every person knows by heart.
And that is the night the lights went out in Georgia.
I think for me, this is something that I never noticed until, I guess, us rewatching it and doing analyzing now, is I never noticed how much the insertion of names became, right? Like when she says, and just so you know, Marjorie, and your children will know. Like, I never noticed, because like last week, right? Ray Don Simpson. I was like, I'm going to start paying attention to this. Is this a thing that is a constant? Or is this kind of like in the early part of the show that they wrote them like this?
I would like to give a little spoiler to you and the listeners. When I was doing research on this episode, Ray Don's in another episode.
Oh no, Ray Don comes back.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, no, Ray Don comes back. And we're not going to talk about it right now, but Ray Don comes back and it's kind of like, oh, okay, we got that. All right.
So Suzanne, while Julia's having this moment,
my heart.
Suzanne looks in and is like, "Oh, my sister loves me."
My heart just was like
every time,
because
every time.
And you know what? Kudos to you, Delta Burke, because your physical acting there and the look on her face and everything. I'm almost choking up. It was beautiful because if I didn't know better, I would have said this was a real moment that just happened.
Yep. So we then go back to the pageant. Claudia's up there answering her question.
Can I please just say this line?
Hold on just one second. Let me close the door real quick because the dog's barking.
My favorite part of this is like when she says, "The truth is, I don't want to be like Jane Pauley."
Not that she doesn't want, that she really wants to be a dancer in Vegas.
Like ladies in Vegas. I was like, and I loved it because I was just like, once again, right? These are things as adults that are just amazing because, you know, like she said it as if she shouldn't say it, right? You shouldn't want that, right? Because I used to have this thought, and when she said that, it reminded me of when I used to think this back in college, right? Which was, because, you know, we had friends that did dance, right? Like, did dance since they were little girls. And so in college, I remember going to see their shows. Like, because one of our friends we went to high school with, I also went to college with. And I remember going to see her shows. And I used to think to myself, what is the end game? Right? Like, what is the end game? You love dancing, and I don't want you to not do what you love. But it was so funny because this reminded me of that thought of like, where are with people that love doing dancing? Like, what are they supposed to do after a certain period of time, right? Like, why do we look down on Las Vegas dancers or like the people that are in the backing doing the dancing and Broadway musicals and stuff? Like, why do we have that? It's a stupid like classism that we still like perpetuates everything.
So I just thought of something, and I want to get your take on it.
Yes.
Does this little mention of Vegas dancers harken back to the Hugh Hefner stuff before?
Yeah. Like
because, you know,
this is all about, it's all about sex politics. Like, And that's the thing, right? This is that the 80s I really felt like, and part of the 90s, I really felt like in terms of like the feminist movement and like the intersectionality with like current politics and also societal norms, that there was this weird kind of like stopgap, right? Like we'll push it to this point, but we're gonna stop, right? Like like when Julia talks about Hugh Hefner and not, you don't see Hugh Hefner. I want to see Hugh Hefner posed on the page of a magazine with a staple through his naughty bits, right? But you never saw like the feminist agenda at the time, like vocally screaming for that, right? Like, and so it was really funny because like when you think about like society, tradition, societal norms and things like that, you never really, there was always this weird line in the sand of like, oh, well, we're going to fight for this, but we're not going to legitimately say like, this is a great thing for women to do, right? No, same thing as like for men, right? It was like, there's always these like worlds of, these are good, this world is good, this industry is good, this one, however, meh, right? Like just like us, like for us as guys, we grew up in a time where blue collar was still like a dirty word, and like it didn't matter if it paid the bills, it didn't matter if you bought a house, like if kids, if they said that their dad worked in a factory, people would just be like, oh, you're like, yeah, they have a house, they have cars, they have a life. Like there's still that whole like world of America and like the way that we segment people off. And so yeah, when she said that in the episode about being a showgirl in Vegas, you almost felt like the audience kind of like feel uncomfortable, like oh, that's not a good thing, that's very bad.
Well, Claudia loses, so we go back to Sugar Bakers.
Let me ask you about that. Do you, because I was confused about this moment, right? For me, this felt like her quitting.
Yeah, I said lose. I think
but no,
you're right.
but that's the thing. Like she didn't. In my head, right? Because in hindsight, you produce things differently. In my head, she would have walked off the stage, right? But what they did is she just stayed there, and they faded to them singing "Happy Birthday" to Suzanne. So I wondered at that moment, did she quit, or did she just speak her piece and the pageant continued?
It probably continued because that's what we do in the South. Knowing that she'd quit, right? Like it's oh, this isn't you, girl. Thank you for letting us know you're going to be in the swimsuit in the next little piece,
right?
But you still have to go through with this whole rigmarole. But thank you for quitting. The black one may win.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Literally, like I would have. I mean, I don't know. I felt like it could have been even more empowering if she had just walked off the stage. Like, could you imagine her? Now, mind you, right? Just so the audience knows, because this is gonna happen occasionally, I did go to school for media studies and things like that, so my brain sometimes speculates on how I feel like it could have been better. So, to me, if I was producing this show, she would have done what she did, and as she stepped off the stage, Maryjo and Charlene would have stood up and started clapping for her, which would have made the audience also clap for her. And that's what I would have dissolved into for the next scene.
Right. I agree with you. However, there are two things.
I know.
Number one, we're only on episode 2.
I know.
Number 2, at this point in time, you've only got one of the women who speaks up.
I know.
And there can be no more than one because they've got all of their money in Julia. Yeah, right? Like right now it is. And Dixie Carter may have even had... My role, girl, don't want... Nah, that doesn't sound like what would happen, but...
I just felt... I don't know. I just felt like her doing that, it felt like to me that it could have been validated better, right?
And But you're also looking at a lens through 90s 2000s, right?
I mean, I guess so, but I mean, good lord, if we're gonna talk about Hugh Hefner having a staple through his hoo-ha, then good gracious, would that have been that much of a stretch to just have like a reaction from the audience that was a positive affirmation to what she was saying? Because it was more just like she kind of set it into the void, and then the music played, and then we dissolved into the next scene.
I mean, also with that said, it could have been that was in there and it was cut for time.
That's true. You're right.
I mean, like this
Very
was
possible.
the 80s.
This was the 80s. They had very specific time restraints, so
yeah,
it's not
like
it's all
and very poorly chosen commercial breaks.
It's not like they're streaming and like The Witcher, where every episode is literally a different length every single episode.
God, Star Trek Discovery's the same way.
Yes, you're like, why is one episode 32 minutes and another episode is 58? What is happening?
My favorite was, this one's 40. This one's an hour 15. What is going on here? Anyway, so they're back at Sugar Baker's. They're eating cake. Julia gives Suzanne her birth certificate as her birthday gift, and it has no birth date in it. And her mom had Suzanne, according to the birth certificate, when her mother was 13.
Yeah.
And like, Julia was like, yeah, and that makes her a year younger than what I am right now.
You know, what's funny though is that like, for her mother, at least as far as I know, is that especially in like certain parts of the South and for certain parts of small communities, that's actually not that off. Like, birth certificates used to be like that slapdash with the numbers. So, you know, I was like, oh, well, there you go.
And Suzanne then gives Claudia a tiara. So, going back to what you were saying earlier, does it have the same impact of her if she marched off stage? Does Suzanne giving her the tiara still have that much impact? Right. If she marched off stage and gets the applause, because Suzanne's giving her a piece of her past because she did better. Suzanne perceives her as doing better than what she did.
No, I get that, but then Suzanne had to blankety blank ruin it because she had to always. There's always a Suzanne addendum. Always, always, always. After she does this wonderful thing and the audience is right there with her and they are totally like feeding off of this energy, she has to then make it clear that she didn't really like that crowd that much because it didn't look that good on her head.
So, you read it differently than me. I read this as that is the Southern tradition of giving somebody something very expensive.
I agree.
And saying, oh, I didn't want it anyway. I didn't need that anyway. It's yours now.
No.
That is a very Southern thing to do.
I know that. Just like you know that. However, within the context of what we're trying to establish for these characters, they will not give Suzanne a break. She cannot just come off as being who she actually is, which is a warm and giving person. They always have that. They always give her an addendum. It's like, if you think she's doing this completely wholeheartedly.
So I have a note here.
No.
That Maryjo's outfit in the scene, that frumpy coat, that long ass skirt, those little boots, is so on trend today.
I know.
I know.
They just had there was a meme about like some kind of like somebody did a screen capture of like clothes in Target and like what they look like, and I was like, wait, that's actually like what she was wearing.
Yep.
So everything old is new again.
Yeah. So Charlene and Maryjo leaves. Suzanne thanks Julia for being her big sister. It was so sweet. And then she, as Julia's walking up the stairs, she says. Suzanne's already outside. She says, I still say 30. And you hear Delta Burke go, 29! from outside. And it ends with pictures of Delta Burke.
I know.
Over the credits. And then ending with Jessica Lange Girl.
Yep. Which is so weird. It's so very weird. I was like, because at first I was like, oh, I forgot that they had like a little montage of when she actually did pageants, and then I was like, I was having a moment, and then that happened, and I was like, why is that there?
Isn't it? Aren't they playing Isn't She Lovely?
Yeah, Stevie, and they bought it. They paid for the rights. It's Stevie Wonder's version of Isn't She Lovely?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. Oh God. So yeah. So that is episode 2.
Yeah.
We should probably start doing a "What did you think of the episode" at the end of this. What did you think of the episode?
I mean, I don't know. We kind of keep stopping halfway through and doing that anyway.
That's true.
That's why it's so long.
So do you want to start doing a "Did you like the episode?" Yes or no?
Yeah, we'll just do like a "Did you like it?" Yes or no?
Okay.
Did I like this episode? Let's do this. Actually, we'll do a yes and a yes and a no and, right?
Okay.
Because there's always going to be a yes and a no about each episode. Did I like this episode? Yes, because it did a better job than the first episode of establishing that Suzanne and her sister Julia actually do love each other, right? That was not that clear in the first episode, and it was really just more of Julia picking on Suzanne. So I really did like that about this episode. My no, what I didn't like about this episode is things could have been pushed further than they were, right? Obviously, I know that it is the 80s, and this was just the second episode, but the repercussions of Julia and Charlene being bullies, that could have been pushed a little bit more, because I felt like them having just a self-actualization, there could have been a little bit more to that, because they literally were like making fun of, or Maryjo especially was literally making fun of children and things like that. So I felt like there could have been a moment of actual like
catharsis.
Yeah, catharsis or comeuppance or something like in that. So those are my yes and my no and.
So my yes. Yes, I liked every moment that had Dixie Carter and Delta Burke in it. Their relationship was great. It was well acted. Dixie Carter's hair, again, is fantastic in this episode. And anytime they are on the scene, it's golden.
Mm-hmm.
However, anytime that it's just Maryjo and Charlene, they are taking both of those characters and changing them into, and this coming from me seeing the rest of the show, taking those characters and changing them into not those characters, right? Like they don't. This is not how those characters would act. And Charlene maybe a little, Maryjo definitely not.
No.
And even I think you could say that even from the first episode, because you see Charlene going, Ray Dawn was just trying to be nice. He just won't come over and talk to us. And Maryjo was like, F him, right? Like, take that to the second episode. It doesn't feel like their characters are exactly the same characters they were in the first episode.
No, yeah.
So I didn't like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you could tell that the show is still trying to get its feet on like the established. And once again, if anyone's listening to this, the 20 of you, we know that this is literally the second episode. Right. And so any TV show, it takes time to establish the actual dynamics at play. And I mean, they're going to be doing this now for 5 seasons.
Right.
Before the cast changes.
Right.
So it's, we're just being nitpicky because that's why you're paying us. Oh, no,
you're not. You're not yet.
But no, I do. I think. What's next week? Have you looked up next week yet?
So next week is season 1, episode 3, A Big Affair. I don't know. Do you want me to read the description?
No.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what A Big Affair is. It would have to be. Maryjo's the only one that would be.
I don't know.
Unless Suzanne's maybe cheating?
I don't think so. Well, isn't there we can't speculate, but we don't want to give away anything, but like, it could be, I mean, technically it could be any of them. We just don't know.
True.
We don't know what the context is for it. So, that's for you, audience. Also, you have your homework. If you have Hulu, if you have a way to find and access episode 3, The Big Affair, we'll keep plugging away, and we'll keep tagging Hulu to see if they'll maybe give us some discount codes so you guys can get some Hulu discounts. If you tell more of your friends about us, then we can have a justification for getting more subscriptions or pinging all of these different people. But hopefully you have enjoyed episode 2 of Baking Sugar, a Designing Women podcast. We've had fun talking about it. We have fun talking, period. So hope you have a wonderful evening. And Miss Mims, you got anything to say?
Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, girl.
Bye, honey. Bye.